Starbucks has had massive success all over the world. Since opening its first store in Seattle in 1971, Starbucks now has over 34,000 stores in about 80 countries, making it one of the most influential coffee chains in history. There is one place in the world where they failed: Australia. In Australia, Starbucks suffered losses of $144 million and was forced to close 70% of its stores in 2008 practically overnight. What went wrong? Let's find out why.
Okay, let me explain.
Starbucks began its global expansion in 1996, starting in Tokyo, Japan. From there, it spread quickly across East Asia, and even in China, where tea, not coffee, is the cultural staple. The brand achieved massive success. But then came a dangerous enemy: arrogance. In July 2000, Starbucks opened its first store in Sydney, expecting the venture to be as easy as taking a dip in a swimming pool. Australia is a country where over 50% of people drink 3 to 4 cups of coffee daily. With an annual coffee market of about $6 billion, it makes up 8% of the global coffee market, and aside from Dunkin' Donuts and Gloria Jeans, there weren't many chain competitors. Starbucks had succeeded even in places without a coffee culture, so failing in Australia, where coffee culture was deeply rooted, was unthinkable. They went for aggressive expansion. Before the stores in the city even settled, they opened chains in the suburbs one after another. Usually, global brands do thorough market research, open just a couple of stores, and adjust their strategies based on local feedback. But Starbucks ignored all that and tried to apply the same model that succeeded in the US directly to Australia. In 7 years, they opened 87 stores, trying to dominate the coffee market as fast as possible. Let's address one important point before we move on. Summarizing Starbucks' success model, it's about serving delicious coffee in a comfortable space to urban professionals. Before Starbucks entered the scene, most coffee in the United States came from the Robusta variety grown in Brazil. It was easy to cultivate but inferior in taste. Everyone knew that the Arabica variety tasted better, but its production was so inconsistent that it carried significant business risks. Starbucks boldly took the risk of adopting Arabica and successfully built its brand around the idea of delicious coffee. Before Starbucks entered the market, coffee shops in the United States were not considered particularly comfortable or inviting spaces. Starbucks wanted to offer more than just coffee. It envisioned a space as cozy as being with friends, where people could linger and relax. This idea struck a chord with American customers. Quality coffee and a relaxing environment inevitably mean higher costs. The people who recognize this value are professionals and office workers. So Starbucks didn't expand slowly in one city, but entered the downtowns of major cities first. These strategies worked not just in the US, but in other countries too. Countries like China, Japan, and Korea had less developed coffee cultures. Even the UK, where tea was more popular, was similar. The thing these countries had in common was pretty simple. Their coffee culture just wasn't as developed as in the US. Starbucks' strategies seemed to work globally, but strangely, they didn't work at all in Australia. To put it simply, because there were 6,500 small cafes in every corner of Australian cities, and they were better than Starbucks. Australia's coffee culture was shaped by Italian and Greek immigrants who arrived in the mid-1900s. They made premium coffee from carefully chosen beans, tailored to the tastes of regulars. So Australians liked strong, hard flavors like espresso, just like the Italians. They even created a coffee of their own, the flat white, which became a national favorite. This tradition had been there for over 100 years. But Starbucks ignored that and offered sweet blended coffees like cappuccinos and caramel macchiatos, which Australians found too sweet. Starbucks assumed Australians would like sweet drinks just because they also share the same English-speaking culture. Even worse, Starbucks was much more expensive than local coffee. While Australian coffee was about 3.5 Australian dollar, Starbucks cost 4.5 to 5 Australian dollar on average. Australians had no reason to pay 30% or 40% more for coffee they didn't even like. The idea of a cozy space with friends wasn't new to them either. In Australia, cafes were like community living rooms where friends, family, neighbors, and even owners connected. Baristas knew their regular customers so well they could serve their coffee without even asking. This close bond with baristas was a key part of Australian coffee culture. So getting mechanical service from baristas who didn't know them felt inhuman, not a cultural experience. Also, Starbucks had baristas in their 20s, unlike the craftsmen-like baristas at local cafes, made people doubt the coffee's quality even more. So after their initial curiosity, Australians went back to their local cafes, where baristas knew them and made coffee to their taste. Now Starbucks is showing signs of coming back in Australia, with stores growing from 23 to 60, but the 2008 failure was a big shock. The new Starbucks in Australia targets a completely different crowd now. They've given up on loyal Australian patients and focus on American and Chinese tourists and international students from Asia. Starbucks itself was inspired by Italian cafes, but it's a lighter, sweeter version made for Americans. So, if we put the Australian failure bluntly, it's like a lower quality version of Italy's coffee culture rushed in and failed. Starbucks overlooked these differences, and that arrogance came from their early success.